Is starting or growing a podcast the right move for you? There's three questions that I really want to go over. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, I have my humongous mug and I love it so much. And it says number one mom. Please tell me like we have some like bo- boss fans, some office fans, where Michael has the cup that says number one boss. He bought it for himself. I did not buy this for myself. The kids bought this for me, but I'm absolutely sipping on my almond milk latte today. Mm. Well, we're talking about this because this is one of those things that is super important whenever we're starting a new year, starting a new season of content, or just really evaluating like what do we want to do with your content, right? Like what do we want to do? I'm recording this, it's the beginning of 2025. We're evaluating like, well, what do I want to do this year? I'm sure you're goal planning, maybe setting resolutions and doing all those things, right? Like these are all the things that I love to do too. So no judgment here. I'm not judging you at all. But I want you to, if you're going to sit down and think about your content, your podcast, what you're doing, I want you to be asking the right questions. So if we're going to talk to two different people in today's episode, right? We're going to talk to those of you that want to start a podcast and you're evaluating like, is this really what I want to do? And then we're also going to talk to those of you that are deciding like, is this the year I'm going to grow my podcast? So the first person is, do I want to start a podcast? The second one is, am I ready to grow my podcast? And all these questions are going to be the same. They're just going to be slightly tweaked depending on which category of the audience that you decide that you fit into today. But this episode is going to be jam packed. I am so excited about the questions that we have here today because I think they're going to be really helpful in your journey and make you think a lot more instead of it just being like tactical, do this, step one, step two, step three. It's going to be more of a reflection on where you are today and where you see yourself going in the future. So let's get right to it. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Proffitt Podcast. If we haven't met before, I am Krystal Proffitt. I am your podcast coach and content strategist, helping you work on the relationship with your content as your content therapist. That's how I like to introduce myself. And it's one of those things that's really evolved over time. And I am just so excited again about today's topic because whether you're thinking about starting a podcast or you're trying to level up, right? You're trying to go like 2025 is going to be the year that I do X, Y, and Z. Well, we're going to have some reflection questions for you to look at. And we're going to dive into the three questions that can make a big impact. And if you figure these out right at the beginning of the year, then there's no telling what kind of magic you can make happen for yourself, for your content in 2025. But I also want to encourage you to stick around until the end because we're going to have a super fun training where I'm going to break down how to grow, stay consistent, and monetize your podcast all without burnout. And it's a really cool free training that you're going to love. And if you're listening to this, like when this goes live, you're going to want to pay attention because it's going to be happening really soon. Okay. That's my teaser. I will shut up about that. And we're just going to dive right into the questions because again, these are going to be for a beginner focus and then a more seasoned focus. Like if you're a seasoned podcaster, you've been doing this for 6, 12 months and you're trying to figure out like, what's the next move for me? So question number one is, what is your goal? What is your goal? If you've been around here for a while, or you've gone through my programs, you've listened to this podcast, watched my YouTube channel, I talk about goals a lot. I talk about planning a lot. I talk about like, what do you really want? What are you trying to accomplish? And if you have not gotten clear on this, right? Like if you're a beginner, let's talk to the beginners first. If you're just starting out, ask yourself, it's such a basic question. If we were in a coaching session, like here we are, we're in a coaching session together. And I would ask you, why do you want to start your podcast? I have an intake form whenever I don't do a lot of one-on-one coaching anymore, but when I did, I would have this form. It's like, what is your goal? Like, why are you doing this? Why? Why does it matter? Is it to grow your business? Is it to connect with an audience of like-minded people? Or is it just to share a passion project, right? Like you're wanting to do something that is out of the kindness of your heart and you just know that this message needs to be out there for the audience that you're trying to serve. Why are you doing this? Why? Why are you doing this? So for me, right, I'm going to give you tons of examples today, but for me, I started my podcast because I was a stay-at-home mom sitting around wondering like, well, okay, what am I going to do with my show, I was blogging is what I was doing. I was blogging very unsuccessfully. And people have told me, they're like, Krystal, you should stop saying that. I'm like, it's very true. I've never been known as a blogger, as like that was my main thing. And I didn't know what I was doing. I felt overwhelmed. It felt very complex and complicated. And I was blogging for a few years trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing. And I was like, why am I doing this? What is the reason? And to be very honest, right, this is the God's honest truth of why I wanted to start a podcast. Blogging was too hard for me. It was too hard. When I realized I could just speak, I could just get behind a microphone and say something instead of having to stare at the cursor that's just blinking at me, taunting me like, you're dumb, you can't write, right? Like there was a lot of like, in retrospect, I've done a lot of my own like content therapy on like, oh, I was really not nice to myself in those early days. I wanted to start a podcast because it was easier than writing. That is just the God's honest truth. I was like, oh, I can talk all day. And I remember, I've heard this quote before. I don't know if it's Seth Godin or somebody in the marketing sphere, right? They talk about writer's block is a real thing. People get stuck on what to write, like what's the next thing, but you don't get talker's block. You don't get speaking block. Like there's never been a day in your life that you go without speaking on some level, right? Like this is really, that message hit home for me. And so that was my why, is I wanted to speak and not write as much. And the other part of my why was I looked around and I said, well, what can I do? Who can I talk about? If I'm going to be talking, what am I going to say? And I realized that I had this deep network of really inspirational entrepreneurial women that I had in my life. Like the first few episodes, if you don't already know this, of what used to be the Rookie Life, it's now all the Proffitt podcast. But if you go back, like dig into the archives, I know we're getting close to 500 episodes, but if you go all the way back, all of those people that I interviewed in the very beginning, I either went to high school with, I grew up with, or I knew on a deep personal level at some point in my life. And that's who I reached out to. I was like, man, all these women are doing incredible things, and I want them to be able to share their story on a platform. So that was my why, right? What is yours? What is your why? What is your goal? Why are you doing this? So that's kind of the beginner focus. And I have an example. So I wanted to share a few examples of people in this community. So I'm sharing my why. I want to share a little bit. And again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, because I know some of these people listen to the show and they're like, Krystal, that is not my why. You got my why way wrong. So I'm going to give you my version of why they are creating the content they're creating for their audience. So Hannah Gill, I've mentioned her a few times on the podcast. She has the Motherhood Flow podcast, and she does birth education and helps, I always forget what it's called. It's VBAC, VBAC. So this is vaginal birth after cesarean. So these are women that have had C-sections and they want to have a vaginal birth afterwards. This is the education that she has, and it's what she practices. And she could really offer so much content to this audience. And that's why she started. Again, it could be a host of other reasons why, but that's like the high level of why Hannah started her podcast and started creating content. I want to talk to the more seasoned podcasters now, because you're like, well, I already have my why, or I've known a goal. Well, do we need to revamp your goal, right? If you've been podcasting for a while, review the goals that you set. Are you still on that same trajectory? Are you trying to grow your downloads or improve your engagement, get more reviews and social proof? Are you trying to monetize? Like, what are you actually trying to do? And the goals may look different now than when you first started. So I want to talk about Hunter Danya. So he has the Modern Hairstylist podcast. You should absolutely go check it out. If you're a hairstylist, you know a hairstylist, go check it out. Because what Hunter did is, and Hannah and Hunter are both previous customers of mine. Like we worked together. And one thing that he did is he wanted to shift from just focusing on, creating the show, like getting it off the ground and creating content, to actually getting clients and to having this system that's built into the larger part of his business. Because he doesn't just create a podcast. Like he does hair and he helps other salon stylists or, salon owners systemize and process everything that they do about their business. So he wanted to take what was one piece of his business and incorporate it into everything. That way it is making money for what they're doing. It is part of the customer journey for them. And it's also a way to really speed up that process of someone just finding Hunter like, oh, here's a podcast. I don't know who this is, to actually becoming a client of his or working with him in some other capacity. So those are just a few examples of baseline goals that you can have. But again, I'm going to ask the question again. What is your goal? If you've never thought about this, like spend some time, journal about it, do a voice memo to yourself. If you're like me and you're a verbal processor, get out, go on a walk, take the dog on a walk and talk about like, what is your goal? Interview yourself. Like you're like, okay, like put me back in your ear and I'll just like re-ask you these questions over and over again. What is your goal? And then just riff on it and talk out loud about it for a little bit and see what you come up with. So that's question number 1. Question number 2, are you ready to commit to consistency? This is a question that I really did not ask whenever I first started. I think deep down, I knew that consistency was really important, but I didn't make this like verbal commitment to anyone that was going to hold me accountable to it. I was just like, okay, publish, we're going to go. We're going to start this podcast thing. But I like asking you this question and proposing it to you because I think making that commitment and having an accountability partner to hold you to what you're going to do in the new year can be super helpful, whether it's checking in with someone or going on and like forming like an actual relationship with an accountability partner. That could be fantastic, but it gets really hard. So again, we're going to talk to the beginners. If you haven't committed to consistency, one small thing can absolutely throw you off your trajectory in the beginning. Here's an example. You start your podcast, you start putting out episodes, maybe quietly, right? You're not really the marketing type. You're not super extroverted. So you're just going to start putting out episodes. You're like, I'm figuring things out. I still don't 100% know what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep putting this out. And then your crazy Aunt Gina, you see her at the next family get together and she's like, hey, I saw you were posting this podcast stuff. What's that all about? Why are you doing this? Do you think that you're better than everybody? Do you, go on about, I'm like thinking of all the terrible people that I've heard. Like I've heard all of these stories. These are not made up. But I'm like, I don't want to out anybody. So we're just going to call her crazy Aunt Gina. Everybody has that one relative. Y'all know who this is for you. Okay. You all have a crazy Aunt Gina that's going to be asking you questions and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, they're making you question every life decision you've ever had. Even though you're a very confident person in other areas of your life, you're all of a sudden, you're just like, oh my God, like, am I making the wrong decision here? I mean, but this is what I'm talking about. These are the things that can throw you off. And then all of a sudden, next time you sit down to record, you got crazy Aunt Gina's voice in your head that's just like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are creating this podcast? You don't have a PhD in this, or you don't have that. Like, we all have those voices inside our head when we're just getting started. So when we make a commitment to consistency, it can squash all those voices so much faster than if you were to just try to keep going on your own. So if you're ready to commit to consistency, say it out loud. I know we're getting into the part of it where you're just like, Krystal, we really are in therapy. Yes, we are. We're going to say it out loud. I commit to podcasting. Say it with me. I commit to podcasting. Now, when you say that, it is a commitment to not only yourself, but to your audience and the people that you're serving and the message that you have to share, whether you're creating solo content or you're going to have guest experts that are going to come on and share their wisdom and their stories and their experiences. Like, you're making a bigger commitment than just, oh, I'm going to sit my butt in a chair and record behind a microphone once a week. It's much bigger than that. And if it's not bigger than that, then I need you to go back to your why, go back to your goal and figure out what's going to be so dang motivating for you to show up week after week, month after month, year after year to keep producing your content. And if you're just beginning, I know you're gonna be like, Krystal, that feels like a lot. Like, I don't know if I'm ready to commit a lifetime to this podcast and what I'm doing. That's okay. But can you commit to just showing up for the next 90 days? Right? Let's break it down. Instead of a lifelong commitment to creating content, can you commit to showing up for the next 90 days? Commit to being consistent, to putting out an episode and whatever consistent means to you, because that will make all the difference. And are there tools and systems that you can streamline throughout the process? Like, this is shifting more into the more seasoned podcasters. So those of you that are ready to show up and commit to consistency, maybe you've fallen off, right? I have had so many people, y'all, like close friends that have been like, Krystal, I stopped producing my content. Somebody even told me they were trying to avoid me asking, how's your podcast going? Because they were so scared that I was going to ask them about their podcast, and they felt deep shame about it. Deep shame. They're like, I haven't published anything in 6 to 8 months. And I'm just like looking around like, I'm not the podcast police, y'all. Like, I'm here to help and support you and love you on this journey. Like, I'm not here to come down like with the hammer and be like, like shaking my finger at you. Like, what have you been doing? You haven't been podcasting. No. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. But if you are someone who you've struggled with consistency in the past, and maybe your New Year's resolution is to show up in a much bigger way, then I applaud you for being so brave to make that commitment. If you're going to, like, step back and ask yourself, like, well, why have I not been consistent in the past? Was it the guests that you had? Was it a crazy schedule? Maybe you overcommitted yourself through a few seasons of the year and you're like, wait, we're not going to do that this year. We're going to make sure that we set aside time to rest and take breaks. And that's how I am able to be consistent. I will tell you right now, y'all, I created, and you can't see this if you're on the audio version, obviously, but if you're watching on YouTube, I bought my year-long calendar. And I already have on here when we're going on vacation, when the kids are out of school, when I'm planning on to be totally out of the office. And this is not only on my wall calendar, it's in my digital calendars too, because that is how I am able to be consistent instead of just realizing the next week, like, oh, I'm going to be out of town. I can't record anything. We're just going to have to skip next week. No. We're going to back up. I'm going to look at everything at a month's view, right? You don't have to look at a quarter. You can look at it every single month and say, okay, I'm going to be out because the kids have spring break and we're going to San Antonio this next year for spring break. So I need to make sure that X, Y, and Z happens before I actually leave. This is how you show up and you're consistent. This is the way that this works. And this is the way, I mean, I've been doing this since 2018, and these systems and processes have been refined for me over time, but it's how I've been able to stay consistent. So again, committing to consistency can mean just everything to your content journey. But I also want to talk about Amanda real fast. So Chef Amanda Schomburg, we've talked about her so many times on here. She has the Baking for Business podcast. I was so grateful. Recently, I did a training for her and her community. So if you're coming over to the podcast from her community, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. But I think that she has gone through several layers of like ups and downs and arounds. And 2024 was a big year for her, y'all. She had Tiffany Amber Thiessen on her show. Do y'all remember Kelly Kapowski from Saved by the Bell? Yes, we all do. She also was, she had Tamron Hall on her show. Tamron was promoting a cookbook, and she just kept sending me like all these huge wins. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I kept thinking, if she wouldn't have been consistent, none of this would have happened. If she would have been one of those friends that had fallen off for 6 months, then when Tamron Hall and her crew went to go figure out someone like, oh, we have this cookbook going out, who are the baking podcasts that we should go? Amanda's show wouldn't have been on there. It wouldn't have been the thing that pops up. Or when Kelly Kapowski was like, I need to promote this cookbook, who should we go see? If she had not been showing up and staying consistent with her show, then that would have never been an option. So again, shout out to everyone that has been consistent the last few years, the last few months, even the last 90 days. Like, I am giving you, like, this is your round of applause. This is your pat on the back. Like, that is such a big deal because y'all, I've said this so many times, so many people will start a podcast in January and come March or April, it's crickets. You don't hear anything else from them. So I highly encourage you, make a commitment to consistency. Now, did you realize I didn't say make a commitment to showing up every single day on social media and once a week for your podcast and twice a week for your YouTube channel? No, because consistency looks different for everyone. What is consistent for me may be too much for you. Maybe it's overcommitment for you. And you're like, Krystal, I can show up twice a month. Amazing. But I want you to commit. Whatever that looks like for you, commit to consistency and showing up regularly for your audience. So again, if you're walking, if you're doing your own thing, I'm going to ask the question again. It's question number 2 is, are you ready to commit to consistency? And if you are, then I encourage you to find someone to help you really have that accountability and stay consistent. Okay, we're moving on. Question number 3. Are you reaching or connecting with your audience? Okay, I'm going to take this super high level and we're going to start with our beginners. All right, beginners. Are you reaching or connecting with your audience? The first part of that is, who is your audience? Okay. If you have not done it, again, there's a bunch of great journaling exercises. So take all these questions, write them down, put them in a Google Doc and have them in front of you. And who are you talking to? Who are you talking to and what do they need? So it's a very layered question because for me, here's a great example of this podcast. Who am I talking to? I'm talking to people that are interested in creating content and they want to do it with confidence. Now, we have a sliding scale of where you are on that journey. You're a brand new beginner, you're a seasoned podcaster. I mean, it kind of varies, but you are on this spectrum somewhere. You have related to one of the stories that I have shared today by saying, yep, I remember those days, or yep, I'm in that area right now where I've been doing this for 12 plus months and I can relate to that piece of the puzzle. So you don't have to be so specific in just narrowing it down super, super niche. You could have a broad audience, but the second part of that is, what do they need? I know my audience. Y'all want motivation from me. You want actionable things, actionable strategies that you can implement, and you need guidance. You need guidance, y'all. I know this. You have told me this. You want to see workflows. You want to see processes. You want to see how to streamline things, because those things, when you figure those out, that leads to confidence. You can't be confident in a messy office. Okay. Let's just be honest. Okay. If you walk into an office and there is just crap everywhere, there's papers everywhere, and there's just like, I'm looking around my office. I'm like, hang on, before I say this, can I really? Yes, I can say this with confidence today. My office is very tidy, but I've walked into workspaces and y'all, it is insane. Like there's just crap everywhere. And when I say crap, I mean papers and stacks of papers and coffee mugs, and it's like a beautiful mind situation. And when I ask them, like, hey, can you find this one document for me? And then it's like a scatter of like, oh my gosh, like they're freaking out. Like they're not confident in what they're doing because they are so scattered all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be totally tidy in order to be a successful podcaster. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you will have so much more confidence when you know what your audience needs and you have everything very buttoned up in a way where it makes sense to you. You're able to deliver a message that your audience understands, and all of that leads to confidence. So that's the first part for the beginner podcaster. Now, for the more seasoned podcaster, if you've already been podcasting, like, check in. Is your audience the same as it was whenever you first started? I had this revelation probably a year and a half to 2 years into creating my podcast. Like, I was creating for people that wanted to start. And I was covering like how to start a podcast, how to launch a podcast, how to pick your podcast equipment, how to get podcast reviews, how to outline your episodes, and everything was about starting your podcast. Then people came to me, it was probably about 18 months after I started the show, and they were like, Krystal, you keep talking about starting. Like, we know, like, we got you, girl. We're on board with you. Like, we're on the train moving, and you're still shouting about stuff that we did 18 months ago. Like, I need to know how to monetize. How do I get better guests? How do I have better interviews? How do I get more reviews for my podcast? It's like they were evolving and they were telling me, like, I'm so sorry. We're going to get off at the next stop if you don't evolve with us. And I heard it loud and clear. So if you've been podcasting for a while, it's time to check in. It's time to see, are you still delivering beginner content to a more expert or advanced level of audience? You need to check in with that because it's time to make that decision. Are you going to keep going on the journey with them? Or are you going to say, hey guys, this is where the train stops. Like, you got to get out. Like, I have 7 other mentors that you can go find, but I'm not it anymore. I'm solely a beginner only podcaster, a beginner only advisor, a mentor, whatever. But if you're going to go on the journey with them, let them know and say, hey guys, don't go anywhere. I know we've covered beginner topics for a long time, or people that are just starting, or people that may be in this stage, but I actually know the 7 next stages that you need to go through or how you're going to get there. So hang on, don't hop up yet. Like, come on, sit back down. I got some popcorn. We got some fresh coffee. We've got some sparkling waters over here. Like, get comfortable because we want you around for the long haul and you need to make those decisions. So if you've already done some content planning for the year and you're looking at it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is still all beginner content, don't erase it, right? Don't delete everything. Maybe just spread it out. Like, I like to hit on some beginner topics in the first quarter of the year. That's usually when people are starting podcasts. And then I like to rotate through those more advanced topics as we get through the mid part of the year. I'm like, oh, well, even if they started in January, by the time July hits, they've already been podcasting for 6 months. They need something different. And then whenever the end of the year circles back around, I'm like, oh, I should probably talk about starting again. But in those mid-year months, I'm talking about something totally different. So evaluate, where is your audience today? And are you going to keep going on the journey with them? Or are you going to have that hard line in the sand that you only talk to a specific part of your audience? It's something that you might not have thought about if you, like, this is your first year. Maybe you started your podcast last year, but it's something that you should evaluate at least once or twice a year. Is your audience different? Are they growing? Are they going in a different direction? Are you going in a different direction with your business? Definitely evaluate that and then see, what is the content that they're engaging with? Like, go back, look at all of 2024 and see what was the highest downloads that you had. What was the content about, or the best interviews? Maybe it's the best engagement. Maybe it's the episode that you sent your email newsletter out and you got like 20 replies. You're like, oh my gosh, like, hang on, let's follow the cookie crumbs of success, because that can really help you decide what else you're going to talk about in the future that's related to those topics. So that's question number 3. Are you reaching or connecting with your audience? And again, for seasoned podcasters or beginners, you need to evaluate what that's going to look like, because it's going to be different for everybody on the journey. Oh my gosh, these are so, I feel like I could go. Like, I just looked down to see how long we've been talking about this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we've already been talking about this for like 25 minutes and I could talk about this for at least 2 more hours. So I'm going to wrap this up here today because I don't want this to be a 2-hour long episode. But when it comes to podcasting and why I believe that podcasting is still the right move, right? Because people are like, well, should I just do YouTube? Should I just do podcasting? Should I just do social media? Like, what can I do? And I always say podcasting can be an amazing way to grow your brand, grow trust with your audience, share your expertise, and really connect with the people that you are trying to help, whether you're trying to help them by selling them one of your products or services, or help them by collaborating with other people. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I think that asking these questions can really refresh your strategy, and it's never too late to do this. If you've been podcasting for 6 months and you've never asked these questions, then start today. Start today and apply them going forward, right? Like, don't shame yourself. Don't be like my friends that were inconsistent for a long time and they shamed themselves forever, because that's actually what kept them from coming back to their show. This here is your little love bubble of content therapy of like, hey, you come in here, like we leave everything at the door. We leave all of our content baggage at the door, and you're going to get nothing but love and support in this community. And I highly encourage you to find that accountability, like find those people that can help you feel confident and feel good about what you're creating, because it's really going to help you in the longevity of your content and show up and keep showing up. But I promised this at the very beginning, right? I teased out that we have something really fun that is going to be happening. Actually, if you're listening to this on real time, it's happening today. The very first one is happening. We have 2 trainings that are coming up. I've never taught this workshop. So I created a brand new training called the 3-part formula to grow your podcast, stay consistent, and start monetizing, and doing all of this without burnout. That's really what it comes down to. So whether you're just thinking about starting a podcast and you're looking for advice, or you're ready to take that next step, again, we were talking to beginners and more seasoned podcasters today, then this is designed to help you make 2025 your best podcasting year yet. So I want you to go to krystalproffitt.com/pod25, POD25, and you're going to find the 2 times to register. So one is Tuesday, January 7th at 12 p.m. Central, and the next one is January 8th at 5 p.m. Central. Now, here's a little known secret, okay? Maybe a little known, maybe a little unknown. We're going to do 2 of these trainings live, and then we're also going to have a limited time replay. So if you can't, you're like, Krystal, this is like too short a notice, I can't make it to either one of those. That's fine, because we're going to have a replay for a limited time only, but you want to show up live. I mean, it's just, y'all know how it is. When you hang out with a group of people live and you get to ask your questions, you get to really see what everyone's doing in real time, and you just get to hang out in a community of like-minded people. It's just so much more fun. So come join us, krystalproffitt.com/POD25, pod25, and register. You're going to find both times there on the website. So go check it out. You do not want to miss this, because this is my first training of 2025. It is going to be the best one that we've done all year. You like that? I know. We've been having a lot of dad jokes around the house, and that's like, yeah, it's my best one all year, because it's my first one of the year. You get it? You get it. So yeah. You're like, Krystal, wrap this up. You're getting a little delusional. It's okay. So whether you're just starting, right, and you're fresh to this, you're brand new to this, or you've been doing this for a while and you're ready to breathe new life into your show, then I encourage you to sit down, do some journaling exercises. Make sure that you're thinking about the things that, like, how you want to show up as a podcaster in the communities that you're a part of, but take that first step. What does that first next step look like to you? I don't know. Well, again, we talked about this earlier. It's going to be different for everybody. What does that look like? For me, it's having clarity of where I'm going to go with my show. It's the commitment to consistency, and it's figuring out how I'm going to create those deeper relationships with my audience so that I can reach my business goals through monetization and scalability, and just growing and reaching a brand new audience with the right strategies. So one last time, go to krystalproffitt.com/pod25 to register for our free training, because it's going to be so much fun. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you are subscribed or following wherever you are listening and watching today. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.